The council chamber was cold. Not cold like winter, but cold like a place that had forgotten what warmth felt like. The walls were made of dark stone that had been polished so many times they looked like mirrors. 17 flags hung from the ceiling, one for each species that had signed the Great Accord. The flags did not move. There was no wind inside the chamber. There was barely any sound. Captain Leon Ward walked in slowly. He was not a big man. He was not the kind of man who filled a room when he entered. He was thin and a little tired-looking, with short brown hair and quiet eyes that had seen too many meetings like this one. He wore a plain gray uniform with no decorations on it. No medals. No ribbons. Just gray cloth and a small patch on his shoulder that showed the blue circle of Earth. Behind him walked Ambassador Diane Cross. She was older than Leon with silver hair, pulled back tight, in a face that had learned long ago not to show what it was thinking. Beside her walked Lieutenant Cole Price. He was young, 26 years old. He had graduated from War College with top marks and had read everything ever written about the galactic sovereignty. He knew what today meant. He had not slept in 2 days. The chamber was already full. Delegates from 16 species sat in curved rows rising up from the center floor like a bowl. Some of them were tall. Some were small. Some breathed different air and sat inside sealed suits. Some had 4 arms. Some had none. They all watched as the 3 humans walked to the central podium and stopped. Leon set a thin data slate on the podium. He looked at it for a second. Then he looked up at the room. "We have asked for a seat on the Security Committee 14 times, he said. His voice was even. Not angry. Not loud. Just clear, the way a man speaks when he has made up his mind and does not need to prove it. We have sent proposals for shared defense, for fair resource use, for better treatment of the smaller colonies. 9 times. We have sent our ships to your border conflicts. We sent medicine when the Mara colonies got sick. We sent rescue teams when the gravitational event happened near the outer rim. We did all of this without being asked. We did it without being paid. We did it because we thought we were partners." He paused. The high delegate of the Sindori, being that looked like a tall structure made of white bone and old pride, made a clicking sound with the hard plates around its jaw. "Humanity's contributions are on record," it said through its translator. The voice that came out was flat and smooth. "However, your species is not suited for governance roles. You are too emotional, too unpredictable. You act before you think. You are. We are leaving," Leon said. That was all he said. For a moment, nothing happened. The room simply sat with those 3 words, the way a body sits with a blow before the pain arrives. Then the silence broke all at once and the chamber filled with noise. 17 translators started working at the same time. Chairs moved. 2 delegates stood. A being of blue gas inside a pressure suit tried to push forward toward the podium and was stopped by 2 Earth Marines who had been standing so still near the side wall that most of the room had forgotten they were there. Diane Cross stepped forward calmly. She placed her own slate on the podium beside Leon's. "We have filed for withdrawal under Article 41, subsection 9 of the Original Accord, she said. This clause allows any signatory species to exit the agreement when they have been blocked from governance participation for more than 20 years. We have been blocked for 32. Every legal requirement for this withdrawal has already been met. The paperwork was filed this morning. The Keth ambassador, a cloud of blue-gray gas inside a transparent shell pushed against the marine, blocking its path, and made a sound like steam escaping a closed pipe. The Mara delegate was shouting something in its own language that the translators were struggling to keep up with. The Sindori delegate clicked its jaw plates rapidly, which was its way of expressing between something anger and disbelief. Leon did not look at any of them. He picked up his data slate. He looked up once at the Great Seal, carved into the vaulted ceiling above. It showed 17 stars arranged in a ring, one for each member species of the sovereignty. None of them was the sun. He turned and walked toward the door. Cole fell into step beside him without being told. They moved through the noise without hurrying. The Marines fell in behind them. The shouting followed them down the first hallway and then became muffled, and then became nothing at all. In the corridor outside, the sound of the chamber faded behind thick walls. The floor here was made of pale stone, and the lights were soft. A long window on one side looked out at the capital world of the sovereignty far below. It was a beautiful planet, blue and green, wrapped in white cloud. It looked peaceful from up here. Most things looked peaceful from far enough away. Cole walked beside Leon for a while, without speaking. He was 26 and he had studied interstellar politics for 6 years, and he had known this moment was coming, and he still found himself needing a moment to believe it had actually happened. "What happens now, sir?" he finally asked. Leon kept walking. "We go home. And after that?" The captain did not answer right away. They reached the great doors at the end of the corridor. Beyond the doors, a shuttle bay. Beyond that, the Resolute. Beyond the Resolute, the long trip back to Earth and the 11 colonies and everything that belonged to humanity and humanity alone. Leon stopped at the doors. He turned back once and looked through the long window at the capital world below. He stayed like that for a while. Cole waited and did not rush him. After that, Leon said quietly, "We watch." Cole thought about asking what that meant. He decided, after a moment, that he already knew. They went through the doors. The shuttle bay was full of ordinary noise, engines warming and crew moving in the mechanical sounds of a ship preparing to leave. Nobody from the sovereignty came after them. No final message arrived. No one tried to stop them at the docking clamp. The Resolute pulled away from the station the way a person leaves a place they will not miss. Steady. Without looking back, Cole sat in the co-pilot seat and watched the station shrink on the rear display. He thought about everything he had read and studied. He thought about 32 years of denied requests and failed proposals. He thought about ships sent to other people's border wars, medicine sent to other people's sick colonies, rescue teams sent to other people's disasters. He thought about the word that had been used in the chamber today, emotional. He looked at the shrinking station one more time. Then he turned forward and looked at the stars ahead. Leon Ward sat in the command chair and said nothing for a long time. The crew of the Resolute knew what had happened. They had all been briefed. They had all read the same 32 years of history. They had all, in their own private ways, been waiting for this day. The Resolute moved through the outer edge of sovereignty space and crossed into the open dark beyond. No ship followed. No beacon tracked them. The border, such as it was, passed beneath them without ceremony. Somewhere behind them, 17 species were arguing in a cold stone room beneath the ring of stars that did not include the sun. Ahead of them, home, Leon watched the stars for a long time, without speaking. Then he said quietly to the empty air, "They'll figure it out." Nobody answered. Cole Price, sitting 3 FT away with his eyes on the navigation display, thought, "No, sir. They really won't." Nobody believed they would actually stay gone. This was the mistake that the sovereignty's best minds all made. Not one economist, not one military planner, not one of the 17 committees convened in the first month after the withdrawal came to any other conclusion. All of them, working from different information and different assumptions, arrived at the same place. Humans were dramatic. They made large gestures. They walked out of rooms and came back when they had made their point. Every diplomat who had ever dealt with Earth knew this about them. They were loud and stubborn and sentimental, and eventually they always came back to the table because they needed the sovereignty the same way the sovereignty needed them. Earth did not come back. The first year passed quietly. Then the second. The sovereignty sent 3 separate diplomatic missions to Earth's main reception station above Geneva. All 3 were received politely. The humans offered excellent food and comfortable rooms and long, pleasant conversations about shared history and common values and the importance of galactic cooperation. No agreements were signed. No new frameworks were discussed. The missions returned home with warm memories and empty hands. On Earth itself, something completely different was happening. Dr. Petra Holloway ran the Seoul Institute of Applied Sciences from a research tower above the ocean in what had once been called Portugal. She was a small woman with large glasses and the habit of thinking out loud in meetings, which her staff had long ago decided to treat as a feature rather than a distraction. When the withdrawal was finalized, Petra had been in the middle of a project that had been sitting in sovereignty review committees for 6 years. The project was a new generation of gravity drive, faster and cheaper than anything currently in use. The sovereignty's review process had slowed it down because several member species held commercial interests in the older technology and had quietly arranged for the approval timeline to remain very, very long. The morning after the withdrawal was finalized, Petra walked into her main lab, gathered her team of 40 engineers around the central table and said, "We are no longer waiting for anyone's permission. Let's build it." They built it in 14 months. This same thing happened across every sector. The relay network that would have allowed instant communication between human colonies had been blocked by sovereignty telecommunications policy for 9 years, protecting a slower and more expensive system that several member species profited from operating. Within 2 years of the withdrawal, the relay network was finished and running. The Arkwright Station project, a plan to construct massive rotating habitats in The outer solar system that could house millions of people had been delayed by resource quota agreements that limited how much raw material Earth's construction companies could access. Without those agreements, construction began the following spring. Meek Daly was 23 years old and had grown up reading about the sovereignty's grand vision of shared galactic progress. He had believed in it the way young people believe in things that sound true. He found himself working on the second Arkwright station above Titan, putting in 18-hour days and feeling something he later described in a published interview as the first real breath after being underwater for a very long time. He was not angry at the sovereignty, he said. He just felt awake in a way he had not expected. The economy grew, not in the careful, managed way it had grown inside the sovereignty's framework of quotas and shared rates, but fast and in directions that nobody had specifically planned for. New companies appeared. Old ones changed shape. The 11 human colonies, freed from requirements that had made direct trade with each other complicated and expensive, began exchanging goods and services directly. The fees that the sovereignty had charged to facilitate this trade had not been enormous. The principle of the fees, it turned out, had been quietly costing something much larger than money. Commander Cole Price watched all of this from Outpost Harlan, a frontier station at the edge of explored space where he had been posted after the Resolute's return. Outpost Harlan was small and remote, and not a place where anything important was expected to happen. Cole had been sent there partly because his superiors thought his presence at the withdrawal made him politically complicated for higher profile assignments, and partly because a junior officer who had been present at the most significant diplomatic event in a generation might be useful watching a border during a period of significant change. He spent his days reading intelligence summaries, monitoring long-range sensors, and maintaining a careful log of everything he observed. He read about the new gravity drive. He read about the relay network and the Arkwright stations and the economic numbers climbing in the quarterly reports. He was proud in a quiet way that he did not discuss at work. He also read the reports from inside the sovereignty. They were not encouraging. The sovereignty had always depended on a kind of invisible structure to hold itself together. Committees resolved disputes before they became crises. Shared economic arrangements aligned the priorities of member species who might otherwise have found reasons to conflict. Diplomatic traditions kept old grievances from boiling over. All of this had worked imperfectly but consistently for over 100 years. What nobody had ever written down, because it seemed too obvious to need writing, was that a significant part of this structure depended on human ships appearing in troubled regions before small problems became large ones. It had never been official policy. Earth had never been formally assigned as the sovereignty's peacekeeping force. But it had happened again and again. When the Veth and the Mara had a serious border disagreement 17 years earlier, 3 Earth vessels had arrived in the disputed zone and simply held position, doing nothing aggressive until both sides found a reason to negotiate. When the Sindori and the Kath had argued over mining rights in the Tanvar corridor, an Earth diplomat had walked uninvited into both their negotiating rooms and offered to arrange lunch. The lunch had become a meeting. The meeting had produced a temporary agreement. The temporary agreement had never expired because neither side wanted to be responsible for restarting the argument. Nobody had thanked Earth for any of this. Nobody had paid them for it or counted it in any official record. Now it was not happening, and the spaces it used to fill were not staying empty for long. Cole noticed the first clear signs in the Silas system. The Veth sent reconnaissance ships. The Mara colonial government filed a formal complaint with the Sovereignty Council. The Council's communications office logged the complaint and routed it to the appropriate committee. Cole read the committee's posted meeting schedule and felt a particular and unpleasant feeling settle somewhere in his chest. He wrote a short message to Admiral Leon Ward, who had been promoted twice since the withdrawal and was now commanding the Earth Fleet's 2nd Division from his office on Luna. The message contained a full summary of what Cole had observed, and at the very end, one line of his own words. It said, "It's starting." Leon read the message on a Tuesday morning while reviewing progress reports for the 3rd Arkwright station. He sat with it for a minute. He thought about the cold chamber with the 17 flags and the seal on the ceiling, with its ring of stars. His reply arrived within the hour. It was 4 words long. It said, "I know. Keep watching." Cole kept watching. He read every report. He tracked every ship movement logged by the long-range sensors. He updated his charts and his files, and his careful, thorough understanding of a situation that was getting steadily and quietly worse in the way that situations do when everyone responsible for addressing them is also responsible for pretending they are under control. Outside Outpost Harlan's observation window, the stars burned the same as always. They did not change for politics. They would burn long after everything happening now was either resolved or forgotten. Cole made another cup of coffee and opened the next report. The numbers were not good. The Veth did not want a war. This was important to understand. They were not violent by nature. They were not reckless. They were an old civilization with long memories and a quiet habit of expanding into spaces that had recently become available. When a neighboring presence withdrew, the Veth moved toward the gap. It was not what most species would call aggression. It was something older than policy, something closer to instinct. It was behavior their civilization had practiced for 400 years slowly and without drama, and it had almost always worked. The problem was that the space they moved into was already occupied. The Mara colony on Silas 3 had been there for 40 years. 60,000 people lived on that world. They had worked the soil for a decade before it would grow anything useful. They had built schools and water systems, and a small hospital that served 3 nearby settlements. They raised children there. They buried their dead there. They were not soldiers or pioneers or political symbols. They were farmers and teachers and engineers who had decided to build a life in a quiet corner of the galaxy and had done exactly that. The Veth scout fleet arrived in the Silas system claiming navigational error. This was technically possible. The Silas system sat near the edge of contested space and navigation. Malfunctions were not unheard of. The Mara colonial government sent a formal complaint to the Sovereignty Council. The council's communications office logged it and routed it to the appropriate committee. The committee scheduled a review hearing. The hearing was set for 3 months later, 6 weeks after the Veth scouts arrived. Veth military installation was under construction in the Sela's asteroid belt. It was not a large installation. That was perhaps the most unsettling thing about it. It was modest in size, designed by every visible indicator as a resupply and sensor station, not a weapons platform, not a staging base for an invasion force, just a structure being built piece by piece in a place where it had no legal basis and no permission, while a committee somewhere was organizing documents for a meeting still 9 weeks away. When Talu was the Mara colonial governor, he was a calm man, the kind of administrator who solved problems methodically and did not panic easily. He sent a second formal complaint to the council, then a third. Each one was more direct than the last. The careful diplomatic language of his early messages giving way to plain description. Veth ships were in his system. A Veth structure was growing above his world. His 14 small defense ships were watching it happen, and there was nothing he could legally authorize them to do about it. The council issued a statement of concern. The statement took 11 days to draft and was 4 paragraphs long. It expressed the council's concern. It noted the need for dialogue. It encouraged restraint from all parties. It confirmed that the matter remained under active review. When read it twice, then he called his chief of security and asked how many defense ships the system had available and what condition they were in. Meanwhile, the situation was spreading in ways that the Mara had not caused and could not control. The Keth shared a long border with the Veth. They also shared 60 years of unresolved arguments about territory, shipping lanes, and resource rights in the region, called the Tanbar Corridor. When the Keth leadership looked at what the Veth were doing in Silas, they drew a conclusion that was entirely logical. From where they stood, if the Veth were quietly establishing positions in systems they had previously left alone, then the Tanbar Corridor might be next. The Keth began moving their fleet, not toward Silas, toward the Tanbar Corridor to strengthen their own positions before the Veth could strengthen theirs. The Sindori had extensive mining operations in the Tanbar Corridor. They watched the Keth fleet movements with the particular anxiety of a species that had invested very large amounts of money in a region that was becoming a military zone. They began repositioning their commercial ships. Military analysts in 3 different capitals looked at the Sindori movements and used phrases like defensive posturing in their reports. Everyone else who looked at the same movement simply said the Sindori were getting ready for something, and that was accurate enough. 60 days after the first Veth scouts arrived in Silas, 4 species were moving ships along 3 separate borders. The Sovereignty Council had issued 2 statements of concern and held 1 emergency session, which had been rescheduled once because 4 of the key delegates were traveling and 2 were in medical care and 1 was attending an unrelated diplomatic summit in a different system. At the Seoul Institute, Dr. Petra Holloway received a full strategic summary from her analysis team and called a private meeting. 12 people sat around a long table in a room above the ocean. The window showed gray water and low clouds. Nobody mentioned the weather. They looked at the maps on the table. They looked at the fleet position charts, with their four-colored zones and the arrows showing movement. The person who spoke first was Aaron Cole. He was not loud. He was the kind of analyst who waited until he was sure of something before he said it, and then said it simply. He specialized in cascade conflict theory, which was the study of how small problems become catastrophic ones through accumulation. He looked at the map for a long time. Then he set down his pen. "There is no human buffer," he said. The room was quiet. The sovereignty's whole system for managing conflict was built on something that was never written down, Aaron continued. Every major border dispute in the last 100 years that did not turn into a full war had human involvement. Not formal, not as part of any official peacekeeping mandate. But we were there. We appeared. We put ships in the space between people who were angry at each other. We sent someone to have a meal with the right diplomat. We absorbed the friction that builds up between species who have old arguments and new weapons. And now we don't, Petra said. And now no one does. Aaron pulled up the Cascade model on the central display. It showed what happened to conflict probability when a stabilizing element was quietly removed from a complex system. The numbers climbed in a shape that none of them found comfortable to look at for long. The sovereignty has no unified peacekeeping force. The member states who might intervene are already parties to the disputes. The Veth are involved. The Myra are involved. The Keth are becoming involved. The Sindori will follow. There is no one outside the argument who has both the motivation and the capability to walk into a room full of species that are preparing to fire on each other and make them hesitate. A junior analyst named Kay Reeves raised her hand slightly. Why did they hesitate before? When we appeared, why did it work? Aaron was quiet for a moment before answering. Because we were impossible to predict. He said, every other species in the sovereignty fights according to a logic that can be understood and modeled. Resources, territory, revenge, cycles of pride and honor that repeat in recognizable patterns. You can build a table for any of those. You can calculate what a species will do under any given set of conditions and be roughly right most of the time. He paused. Humans fight for things that don't fit any table. We fight for people we have never met on worlds we have never seen for reasons that often turn out to be stories we told ourselves about what was right. No other species could calculate what we would do. So before they pushed any crisis to the point of no return, they always paused. They could not afford to guess wrong about us. Kay considered this. And now they know exactly what we will do. Aaron said, nothing. We left. We removed ourselves from the equation. We will not be appearing. There is nothing to calculate anymore. And so there is nothing to pause for. The room stayed quiet for a while. Outside, the gray water moved without hurrying. Petra looked at the Cascade model on the display. She looked at the 4 zones and the moving arrows and the numbers climbing along the right edge of the chart. She thought about 60,000 people on Silas, 3 who had spent 10 years making dead soil grow food. She picked up her tablet and sent a Message to Admiral Leon Ward. It used no formal language. It said only, "Are you watching Silas?" 3. His reply came before she reached the elevator. It said, "We have been watching everything." She read it twice. She was not certain whether it made her feel better or worse. She decided it was something in between, which was probably the honest answer. She went back to her desk and opened a document she had been working on for 3 years. It was almost finished. She finished it that night. It was not an analysis. It was not a projection. It was a plan written in plain language for a system that should have existed a long time ago. Speaker Prime Orvath of the Mara Council arrived on Earth on a Thursday morning. He came nearly alone, which was unusual for a diplomat of his rank. A Speaker Prime normally traveled with a full staff and a security detail. Orvath brought 2 assistants and made no request for security. Earth's protocol office noted this quietly and arranged protection anyway, at a discreet distance. He had been chosen for this mission for 3 reasons. He had dealt with humans before, which gave him useful background. The Mara were the species most directly endangered by the situation in the Silas system, which gave him motivation that no one could question, and every other senior delegate who had been offered the assignment had found reasons not to accept it. Going to Earth to ask for help was not a comfortable thing. Everyone understood what it meant. He was received at the Johannesburg Reception Center by Ambassador Diane Cross and a junior member of her staff, named Lily Swan. Lily was 24 years old, very organized, and had been briefed to make the Speaker Prime welcome while committing to absolutely nothing. She was good at this. She offered him a warm drink suited to his biology and mentioned the view of the city below, which was genuinely beautiful in the morning light. Orvath had prepared carefully. He had notes divided into 6 sections and arranged in order of priority. He had 3 separate appeals designed to connect emotionally, each tested on focus groups. He had historical records going back 80 years showing the long relationship between Earth and the Mara people. And in the inner pocket of his formal robe he carried a letter signed by 11 of the sovereignty's 17 member states, formally requesting that humanity return to full participation. He had prepared for negotiation. He expected to probe and be probed, to offer things and have things asked of him, to spend 2 or 3 days slowly building toward an agreement. This was how diplomacy worked. He had done it 100 times. Diane Cross listened to all of it. She sat across from him at a plain table in a comfortable room and listened to all 6 sections and 2 of the 3 emotional appeals and a significant portion of the historical records. She did not interrupt. She did not write anything down, which he found mildly unsettling. She listened with an expression that was attentive and pleasant and revealed nothing at all. When he finished, she poured more of the warm drink into his cup, settled back in her chair and said, "What would you like us to do?" Orvath blinked. He had not expected to arrive here so quickly. He felt briefly like a man who had prepared to climb a long staircase and found himself at the top after the very first step. "We need Earth to rejoin the Accord," he said, "with a guaranteed and permanent seat on the Security Committee, effective immediately upon signing." "What else?" He organized his next point. We need Earth fleet presence in the Sela's system. The Mara colony is at serious risk. The Veth installation remains active. The Council's review process has not produced any enforcement result, and without an external presence to stabilize the situation. Speaker Orvith, Diane said. Her voice was not unkind. It was simply direct, which was a different thing. Before we discuss what actions might be taken, I want to make something clear. We are not angry. We did not withdraw because of pride. We withdrew because we were being asked to do the work of partners while being treated as staff. We showed up in every crisis, sent ships to every conflict, provided aid to every outbreak and disaster. And when the decisions were made about how this organization would be run, we were not in the room. She paused. We are genuinely open to returning. But if we return without addressing why we left, the same situation will arise again. And when it does, it will be worse. Because everyone will have learned that nothing changes regardless of what happens. We accept the Security Committee seat, Orvith said. This is already agreed among the member states who signed the letter. It is not in question. The seat is not the central issue. Diane said. The issue is that a system which functions only because one species quietly keeps it from falling apart is not a real system. It is one species being depended upon without acknowledgement. She reached into the folder beside her and slid a document across the table. We have a proposal. Orvith picked it up. It was substantial. He began reading. The document proposed a new accord to replace the old one. It created a joint sovereignty peacekeeping corps with genuine operational authority, staffed by all member species in proportion to their fleet size, funded through a transparent formula that every member state could examine and audit. It established what it called a rapid arbitration mechanism, a binding preliminary ruling required within 72 hours of any formal conflict. Notification. No more committees meeting 9 weeks after the problem had already grown into a crisis. It defined in plain language what each member species was expected to contribute and what they were entitled to receive. It named things that had previously been left unnamed. He read it for a long time. Lily Swan quietly refilled his drink, once without interrupting. This is very thorough, he said. Finally, we have been working on it for 5 years, Diane said. He looked up at her. You knew this situation was coming. We hoped it would not, she said. We planned for the possibility that it would. He set the document on the table. He was quiet. He had been a diplomat for 40 years and he knew the feeling of sitting across from people who had already done every piece of thinking that you expected to do together. There was nothing to negotiate here. The document was complete. Every gap he might have probed had been addressed. Every weakness he might have found had been closed. I will bring this to the full council, he said. We know, Diane said. We are ready to begin as soon as they are. Orveth left the following morning. He sat in his shuttle as it lifted away from the landing pad and looked down at the city spreading out below the morning clouds. He thought about the document in his bag. He thought about 5 years of preparation, written down in careful plain language, waiting for a moment when someone would finally be ready to read it. He thought about 32 years of committee submissions from Earth that had gone unanswered. He thought about 14 requests for a security committee seat that had all been denied. He thought about the debates in which his own people had voted against giving humans a real place in government, and about the word that had come up in those debates, the word meaning too unpredictable, too emotional. He looked down at the clouds and thought we did not understand what that meant. On Luna in his office, Admiral Leon Ward was reading the same feed from the meeting in Johannesburg. Commander Cole Price sat across from him. Navigator Sarah Brent stood near the window with her hands in her pockets. The Sela situation was still active. The Mara colony had lost contact for 6 hours 3 days ago before communication was restored. The Veth installation had not grown, but it had not come down either. The Council's review meeting had been rescheduled again. If they sign, Cole said, we go back. Unofficially. Yes, Leon said. If they don't. Leon looked at the display showing the Sela's system. He looked at the small point of light. That represented the colony. 60,000 people. School buildings and water systems, and crops growing in soil that had taken 10 years of work to make fertile. He was quiet for long enough that Sarah Brent, who had served under him for 9 years and had learned to read his silences, turned from the window and began pulling navigation data without being told. If they don't sign, Leon said, we go. Anyway. Cole looked up. Without council authorization. There are 60,000 people in that system. Commander. Leon's voice stayed exactly the same as always. Even. Tired. Clear. The council can sort out the paperwork. We will be there. That is not current policy, Cole said. No, Leon agreed. It is not. He did not say anything more. He did not need to. There was no policy language for it. Because the reason humans went was never the authorization to go. It had never been that. They went because there were people in danger and they could not make themselves look away. That was the whole of it. It fit on no form and satisfied no legal requirement. It was simply true. Sarah had the navigation data ready in 4 minutes. The Veth pulled back on a Wednesday. There was no announcement. No spokesperson appeared before cameras. No statement was issued explaining the decision. The installation in the Silius asteroid belt, which had taken 6 weeks to build, began coming apart quietly on Wednesday morning, and by Wednesday evening the ships carrying its components were already moving back toward Veth space in a calm and orderly way. Anyone looking at the long-range sensors could see the reason. 7 Earth warships had arrived at the edge of the Scylla system the previous evening. They came in without rushing and took up positions without aggression. They did not power weapons. They did not broadcast threatening messages. They did not charge toward the Veth installation or attempt to cut off the shipping lanes. They simply appeared at the edge of the system and stopped there, quiet and still, in the space between the Veth installation and the Mara colony on the planet below. The lead ship was the Resolute. Admiral Leon Ward sat in the command chair and watched the sensor display. He had not slept well in 2 days, but he did not look troubled. He looked like a man sitting in a chair. He had sat in many times before, doing something familiar. In the Veth Fleet command ship, Admiral. Dax Mora ran the scenarios twice before, calling his officers together. The numbers were straightforward. 31 Veth vessels against 7 Earth vessels. Any standard projection gave the Veth an overwhelming advantage in direct engagement. Dax Mora was not a standard thinker. He had spent 20 years studying how other species behaved in conflict, and he understood something specific about the ship sitting at the edge of the Silas system. He understood it in the way you understand a thing when you have been paying careful attention for a long time. If we fire on the Resolute, he said to his officers, the response will not match the scale of the action. His intelligence officer, Vel, nodded. Once, humans do not respond proportionally to direct military engagement. They respond completely, Dax said. Every human colony, every human fleet asset, every human citizen who reads the report and feels something they cannot explain will expect their government to act, and their government will. We are not calculating 31 against 7. We are calculating 31 against everything they have built in 8 years of building freely. He looked at the display for a moment. And we do not know what that is. We have estimates. We do not have certainty. The room was quiet. Order the withdrawal, Dax said. The installation came down piece by piece. The ships moved out steadily. The Silas asteroid belt became empty. Again, the way it had been before any of this started, and the silence it left behind was the particular kind of silence that follows a decision wisely made. On the planet below, when Talos stood outside his administrative building in the early morning and looked up, the asteroids were not visible from the surface, but he knew they were empty now. He had read the sensor reports 4 times to be certain. He stood in the cool morning air and breathed for a while slowly without moving. Then he went inside and sent a message of thanks to the Resolute. Leon read it at his station. He passed it to Cole without saying anything. Cole read it and set it down carefully. The way you set down something that means more than you want to show in front of other people. The new accord was signed 11 days later. Speaker Prime Orvith presented the document to the full sovereignty session. Without his usual long opening remarks, he placed it on the table, said he recommended signing it, and sat down. 14 delegations voted in favor. 3 voted against. The 3 dissenting species were all directly involved in the border disputes. The accord was designed to prevent, and their objections were recorded and noted, and then set aside because 14 was enough. The accord created the Joint Sovereignty Peacekeeping Corps. It established the rapid arbitration mechanism with its 72-hour requirement. It created the transparent funding formula. It gave Earth a permanent seat on the Joint Command Council. It put into writing things that had always been invisible and assumed, and it did so in plain language that left no room for quiet renegotiation later. Commander Cole Price attended the signing ceremony in Leon's place. The Admiral was still in the Silas system, completing the Veth transition and ensuring the Veth withdrawal was fully finished. Cole wore his dress uniform, which he had not put on in 2 years, and stood in the great chamber beneath the 17-star seal while 14 ambassadors added their names to a document that Earth had written 5 years before the sovereignty was ready to ask for it. He thought standing there should probably be an 18th star in the seal now. He did not say this to anyone. It was not a thought for a ceremony. It was a thought for later, for the long work ahead, for the years of building the new system to replace the one that had failed. Afterward, a young Keth diplomat approached him near the door. The Keth were a gas-based species, and this one traveled inside a transparent suit that made a soft, continuous hum. It was young by Keth standards, which placed it at roughly the same point in its life that Cole was in his. It had the quality of curiosity that belongs to young creatures encountering something genuinely new. "I have a question," it said through its translator. Cole waited. "Your people left," the Keth said. "You were gone for 8 years. You could have demanded what you wanted from inside the sovereignty. You had provided services the whole system depended on. You had real leverage. Why did you leave instead of using it?" Cole thought about this. He thought about Leon Ward walking out of the chamber with no hurry and no anger. He thought about Petra Holloway finishing a document at her desk above the ocean late at night. He thought about Sarah Brent pulling up navigation data before anyone gave an order. "We had tried using that leverage from inside," he said. 14 times in formal requests. Many more times in quieter ways. The answer was always no. And the answer was always no because nothing was visibly failing. The system appeared to be working. It appeared to be working because we were quietly maintaining it. As long as we kept doing that, no one needed to ask whether it was fair. There was no pressure to look at it. Honestly, there was no reason to change. He paused. The only way to show what something is worth is sometimes to let people find out what things look like without it. The Keth considered this for a moment. "You let things get bad," it said, "to make a point. We stopped carrying weight that was not ours to carry alone," Cole said. "What happened afterward was not something we created. It was something that was always there. Underneath. We stopped being the thing that kept it from showing." "That is a very human answer," the Keth said. "Probably," Cole agreed. He looked up at the 17-star seal one more time. Then he walked out. In the Sela system, Leon Ward stood at the observation window of the Resolute and looked down at the colony lights below. From orbit, the settlement was a small cluster of warm light in the dark of the land. It looked fragile from this distance. Most things looked fragile when you could see all of them at once. He watched the lights for a long time. He thought about 32 years. He thought about 14 committee submissions. He thought about ships sent to other people's border wars and medicine sent to other people's sick and rescue teams, sent to other people's disasters. He thought about a cold stone chamber and the seal with 17 stars, none of them the sun. He thought about Cole Price asking what happens now in a quiet corridor and about his own answer, which had been we watch. They had watched. And then they had come. Below him the colony lights moved slowly out of his view as the planet turned, carried away by the ordinary motion of the world. He stayed at the window until they were gone. Then he went back to his chair and looked at his schedule for the next day, and drank coffee that had gone cold and let his mind settle into quietness. On the surface of the colony, a Marech named Ven was watching a human supply Shuttle land in the open square near her family's home. She was 8 years old. She did not understand everything that had happened in recent weeks. She understood that something bad had been close and then moved away, and that the humans had something to do with that. She watched the crew work. They moved fast and with purpose. They unloaded crates of medical supplies, water equipment, and communication parts. They did not slow down to be thanked. They did not appear to be keeping track of what they were doing as a favor. They just worked until the shuttle was empty, then prepared to leave. That night she asked her father what humans were. He thought for a while. He was not a man who answered quickly when a question deserved a real answer. They are the ones who come, he said, when things are bad enough that everyone else has stopped moving. They come. Ven thought about this. Why? She asked. Her father looked out the window at the sky. The Resolute was up there somewhere, continuing its slow patrol of the system. It had come to protect before anyone had officially authorized it to do so. I am not entirely sure they know, he said, but they do it every time. Ven held on to that. She kept it with her for the rest of her life, and she told it to her children, and they told it to theirs. Above them all, steady and quiet in the dark, the Resolute kept watch. That was enough. It had always been enough.